For the longest time, the Maruti Suzuki Ertiga has been your default choice if you wanted an affordable but still useful family MPV. But that hasn't been the case lately, with the Renault Triber at one end and the Kia Carens at the other. So to keep the Ertiga in the fight, Maruti Suzuki has given it a slight nip and tuck. We're here today to see what's changed, considering you get a new engine and a wider range of CNG options. Now, changes to the outside of the Maruti Suzuki Ertiga facelift are quite subtle. Now, the most noticeable of these is this more expressive chrome winged kind of grille here that you see here. And moving to the side, you get a slightly different design to the alloy wheel with a dual tone look. You get two new color options, a grey and a brown. But of course, this maroon shade has been carried over. Now, moving to the rear, there's another small change, which is this sort of chrome lining that you get on the boot lid. Now, the Ertiga has a 60 kg water equivalent CNG tank, which you fill through this stainless steel sort of port here. And of course, all manner of safety systems like an auto cutoff switch while refueling and an atmospheric release system when there is a CNG leak have been put in place. Now, the CNG tank obviously remains where it was, and as you can see, it's fitted in quite naturally into the whole thing. Of course, when all the three rows are up, it does eat into boot space, but considering the MPV size, you do get some space still over here. So how do you tell the Ertiga CNG apart from the regular Ertiga on the inside? You get this mode switching switch over here, which works quite seamlessly and effectively in switching between the petrol and the CNG modes. And then on the digital dial, you get this mode ratio switch, which is quite useful in showing you how much you use CNG and petrol, as well as a digital readout of the CNG level, as well as an analog readout on the instrumentation to show you how much CNG fuel you have left. Now, changes to the Maruti Suzuki Ertiga as part of its facelift are again quite subtle. You get this darker wood trim which does look more premium, as does this new grey and beige upholstery pattern. But with the CNG variants being limited to the VXI and ZXI trims, you don't get the new SmartPlay Pro infotainment system that the ZXI Plus gets. But this older infotainment is not too bad, it's still quite intuitive, so it's not too much of a loss. What is a loss is that you miss out on features like cruise control, the side airbags, as well as the auto headlamps, which are quite stark considering that the Ertiga CNG is still Rs 13 lakhs on road. You do get a height adjustable driver's seat, climate control and projector headlamps though. As before, there's quite a bit of space in the Ertiga's cabin, helped by the large windows and the high roof. Now, the thoughtful engineering that sets apart rivals like the Triber and the Carens is somewhat missing in the Ertiga, but it must be said that in absolute terms, the Ertiga is still a nice place to spend time in, especially in the second row. You get sliding and reclining seats. There's an AC vent here, so it keeps you cool, and the door pockets, while not exceptionally large, do the job at hand, and the seats themselves are nice and supportive. The cushioning is just right, and these large windows give you an airy sense of feeling. Now, this is how you get into the third row of the Ertiga. Now, this seat doesn't tumble fully, which is a bit of a drawback, but it must be said that the opening is good enough for children and the like to get in. Now, getting in might not be very simple, but once you're in the third row, you realize that there is a decent amount of space here, especially for children or smaller adults. And now set the second row in a way that even the passenger here has a decent amount of legroom. And as you can see, knee room for me is not all that bad. Of course, there's not too much under-thigh support. And I can recline the seat back, which means that getting into a comfortable position for, say, longer journeys is also doable in the Ertiga. The Ertiga now gets a wider range of CNG variants. But a significant change is that the 2022 Maruti Suzuki Ertiga facelift now gets the updated 1.5 litre K15C 4-cylinder petrol. This motor comes equipped with the dual jet tech, which improves overall efficiency and drivability, although power figures have dropped marginally by 2 PS and 1 Nm to 103 PS and 136.8 Nm. In this CNG variant, the outputs drop slightly more to about 100 PS and 136 Nm in the petrol mode, while in the CNG mode this drops further still to 88 PS and 121.5 Nm. The petrol Ertiga facelift can be had with a 5-speed manual or a new 6-speed automatic with paddle shifters. while the CNG is manual only. You also lose out on the mild hybrid tech with the Ertiga CNG. But as with any of these K series engines, even with CNG power, this motor is largely smooth and refined, with only a thrum coming through at higher revs. Now you can't start off the Ertiga on CNG power alone, which is a bit of a miss considering that means you will have to keep some petrol in your system throughout. But it must be said that the switchover between CNG and petrol is very seamless and almost imperceptible. As you can see, I'm in CNG, switch to petrol, and you barely feel it. There's no noise, there's no sudden change in performance or anything of that sort. Now for the way it drives, there is a 12 PS and 15 Newton meter deficit between the petrol and the CNG modes. But to be honest, it isn't too apparent, say below 2000 RPM or when you're just moving along, ambling along the way I am right now. It's only when you sort of hit the throttle a bit harder like this, where you do notice the gap in performance between the two modes. Of course, you have to drive it back to back to know the difference. But as it stands, the Ertiga CNG is a perfectly usable city car. There is a steady supply of performance throughout the rev band. The CNG fueling is quite consistent. There's no, hiccups in the way it delivers power. And the gear shifts, they are, as you would expect in a Maruti Suzuki, they are light, precise, which means that when you are getting up to speed like this, it is quite a stress-free driving experience. It's a great city car, as it's always been the Ertiga, and the CNG power just helps that. Of course, when you have to make quicker overtakes, there is a bit of an issue with the absolute performance that it has. But again, this is a family car and you won't be driving it too fast. So for the use case of it, the Ertiga CNG is perfectly usable. Now we couldn't put the Ertiga CNG through our full mileage test, but the 26.08 kilometers per kg CNG efficiency figure should make it possibly the most efficient and the most economical to run 3-row car in the country. We were pleasantly surprised to see in our in-gear acceleration tests that the Ertiga is actually marginally quicker in the CNG mode in certain situations. At low revs and higher gears, the work that Maruti Suzuki has done to ensure consistent fueling in the CNG system seems to have been effective. Impressive considering the performance deficit. Even the lack of a sixth gear isn't too apparent, but that may be a drawback with a full load of passengers. Like I mentioned earlier, there is a perfectly wide, seamless power band. Now the ride quality is again something commendable. It'll pummel over bumps and potholes pretty well. You barely feel any of it in the cabin. But we would have liked the steering to have been retuned for this update. It's still got that sort of gloopy feeling, where it doesn't come back to center that easily. It's not the most direct. But again, for the use case of the Ertiga, it's perfectly usable. And the Ertiga CNG, like I mentioned, should be great as a family car. Now the K15C motor is fairly refined when you're just trundling along like this. Of course, it gets a bit thrummier when you rev it out. But even then, even when you are sort of pushing it a bit more, there is a steady, quite sizable performance on offer. Of course, that might be dulled down a bit with a full load of passengers, but right now, as you can see, the Ertiga CNG is perfectly capable of keeping up with traffic, and it isn't too stressed while doing it, which is a positive. Of course, when you need to pull, say, a slightly faster overtake, you have to work the gearbox, considering it's only a 5-speed. But again, the wide power band does help in this case. In terms of other safety equipment, again, the lack of a top spec variant has put the Ertiga CNG at a disadvantage. You don't get the 4 airbags and ESC from the ZXi Plus. This variant is limited to the government mandated 2 airbags and ABS. There are also no rear disc brakes. In unladen panic braking situations, the MPV's rear can step out of line, although the outright stopping distance and the feel from the pedals is par for the course. So is the Ertiga CNG a good family car? Of course it is. It can't match the features and the practicality of its newer rivals, but you must remember that it's the only CNG 3-row car in India, which gives it an immense advantage considering the way fuel prices are going, and considering that the rest of the car is a perfectly capable mechanical package and it's inherently efficient. The Ertiga CNG does make for a compelling choice if you are looking for a usable, competent and efficient family car.